Christchurch, 22nd of February 2011, is struck by a 6.1 magnitude earthquake that results in 185 deaths, over 2,000 injured, and $40 billion worth of damage. The next 5 years would be hard for Christchurch.
The clean-up and demolition of over 1,000 buildings and repairs of 10,000 more meant for a lot of time and money spent, and a lot of people out of house and home.
At the time, Em was only in primary school when the quake struck. So how were you and your family affected?
Well, my family has been into two families essentially. My dad and stepmum live in the city in Cashmere on the hill, and my mum and stepdad live in Amberley, which is about 45 minutes away. They weren't heavily affected. We had only a few minor broken bottles and stuff and a few cracks, but nothing to actually warrant any danger. My house up here, however, did have quite a bit of damage, particularly in the first, and essentially we had one chimney that fell down. Apart from that, the rest of the house mainly suffered from structural damage, which wasn't quite as easy to see. So it was cracks and stuff over the walls, which we then found out later on through EQC investigations. And so for the main part, it wasn't damaged enough to be demolished. However, it was enough for it to need repairs to be made. We're quite lucky compared to other houses on the hill. Our house is longitudinal towards Christchurch, while other houses are running lengthways towards it. And because of that, it meant that our house was less damaged compared to others.
How would you say you were affected personally?
Well, since my school is in Banks Avenue, which was in the eastern Christchurch, and that area was heavily affected by liquefaction in particular, as well as the seventh waves of the earthquake. And so at the time, my school was closed for, based on memory, about a month or so, at least a month. And during that time, unlike other students, I didn't go off to a neighbouring school. I actually got homeschooled for a wee while by my nana. And during that time, I just did wee projects for her and things. And so, since this house was too damaged, I stayed with my mum for a wee while. And eventually, after a time, I moved back here. And during that time, my dad's side of the family rather, was renting a house down in sort of sea level Cashmere, probably about 20 minutes drive from here. And during that time I was staying there, it allowed me to see them and stay with them while the house was getting repairs done, as well as remodelling, because we had the option obviously of EQC. And so while I was separated from them a wee bit, when that repair started happening again, then it meant that I could come see them again, although the house was smaller and so a little bit more cramped than I was used to. Eventually, we ended up moving, my stepmom and dad moved back into this house a couple of months before the repairs were done. I'm not sure of the exact reasons myself. I was only 14 then, I think. And then during that time I said my mum mainly at that point, because it wasn't really well finished at that point. And so my dad and stepmum stayed in sleeping bags and stuff downstairs, and they had a wee little makeshift kitchen in the meantime, because this upstairs area was still had tons of stuff done to it. Eventually I was able to move back in and things were okay then, but the main effect for me during that time was a few months of homeschooling, which put me behind on some uni schoolwork, where I've caught up to it now of course, and also just lots of moving. Although thankfully, since my parents are divorced and I get to move between their houses naturally, it wasn't too much of an issue for me at the time. So yeah, that's the main effect.
Another one of the major issues in the 5-year span was the uncertainty of jobs and work, as a majority of businesses had to move to the western suburbs, as well as stay temporarily closed or carry out limited operations as the needed repairs were completed. So at the time of the quakes, you owned and managed the Cafe Silverbacks. What would you say was some of the biggest struggles as a business owner at the time?
People's welfare was the big issue. Staff, customers. We had, in February when the second quake hit, we hit right on lunchtime, so there were people eating their lunches. There was food flying everywhere, and people were stressed and panicking. But the main thing was keeping our staffing numbers up, and we found a lot of our staff were dealing with their own issues and weren't able to come into work after that. And because we still had electricity, we were able to keep operating to some degree. We were bringing in 20-litre bottles of water from Rangiora and trying to pump those through the coffee machine, which it didn't like. But staffing was the big thing. Because we were open and so many other places were closed, we had queues of people in the car park all wanting coffee and food. There were police, rescue people, fire people, usual customers and people from all over town just wanting coffee and something to eat. And not having the staff to help us with that was a pretty tough time. The customers, our regulars, were amazing. They kicked in really quickly with, well, we'll wash your dishes and we'll do this and we'll help. And we found a lot of people just came to sit because they might have been like elderly and living alone and frightened of the aftershocks, so they just came and sat and to be with other people and to feel safe. We had one of our customers and his family, they had quite a popular band and they set themselves up in the car park at lunchtimes, and it was quite an amazing atmosphere. All our food and coffee was served in disposable cups because we couldn't wash dishes. We had a rainwater tank up on the roof, which was really lucky. We were able to use that water and boil it to clean utensils and that sort of thing. And it was about a week before the water came on, and then of course it all had to be chlorinated and to keep it safe. But it was very challenging in terms of the workload, particularly on Roger and I. I think we worked something like 50-something days without a day off. And we were working long hours from like 5 in the morning through till about that late at night as well. So yeah, so that was a big issue, and we couldn't get staff. We advertised, we went to the employment service and various other places, but staff, everybody was so busy dealing with their own stuff that we really struggled with that. It was tough.
On top of all this, many schools and education centres were closed due to damage to classrooms and destroyed or damaged equipment, with schools either merging with other schools to share their facilities or moving to a temporary location whilst repairs and rebuilds were taking place.
Mike, at the time of the quakes, was a tutor at UB School of Design. At the time, when the earthquakes first struck, how did UB take the recovery process?
Well, yeah, it was quite a lengthy process, as you imagine. Ironically, we just moved into a purpose-built building. This was because the other one had been damaged by the primary earthquake of 7. Been there 3 weeks and devastated, and it knocked us back. So, and when you've actually lost the physical building that you're in for a college, you can imagine it's quite a struggle. And building up to that, there was a lot of movement and rental places, and one that was all the way out at Lincoln, another one where we were literally, all the classrooms were in hotel rooms, because that's what we had to make do. So it was making the best of the worst situation.
And what would you say was the biggest?
Yeah, like I said, to be able to get up and running and to physically have the place to teach, but then also the ongoing implications of what it is doing as a city. It's being rebuilt, people with their emotional and mental health needs that are being knocked back, and this all happening to everyone and compiling, so a lot of struggle and hard work to maintain and not go under, as a lot of places did not make it through that event.
Ryan Baker has lived most of his life in Christchurch. So what would you say are some of the most notable changes that have come to Christchurch since the earthquakes?
Probably the whole landscape of the city's changed. All the landmarks that I used to recognise as a kid growing up and as a young man are all gone. The cathedral's still there, but it's in pieces, and that was probably the most notable building that you'd remember.
And what would you like to see come in the future for Christchurch?
Just to see the central city grow and become more vivacious, and more people use it. A lot of people after the earthquakes migrated out towards the malls and out to the suburbs, and there's just not a lot of people going back into the city without a specific purpose. So it seems to have lost a little bit of its personality via people. So seeing the people go back into the city and seeing that element grow would be really great.
So how has UB fared since the earthquakes in way of repairs?
Well, we've not only have we got through, we're back better than ever. We've got a purpose-built facility that's state of the art, great for shooting and filming. A green screen studio with a drive-in, sound equipment, really spacious classrooms with high-tech technology. In fact, we came back with bigger numbers than we ever had before the earthquake, which was really great to see, and getting back into delivering what's needed for the people that want to train for the creative industries.
And what would you say are still some of the ongoing issues that you're trying to resolve?
Good question. I mean, the building's back, but like I referred to, it's more the dealing with the human aspect and everything. It takes a bit longer. I mean, understandably, especially with the people, the age of the students we've got. It's the mental health and the psychological, but that's where I think UB is really cool, because we use this and we give support and understanding for the students to realise to come in the learning, and that we know exactly what they went through, but they went through it in an important part of their life, and we look towards that in moving forward together, so that we can, because we fix the physical structures and use that as a framework to fix the people as well, which is the step that we're undertaking now.
And how do you think Christchurch is doing now for businesses, now that the repairs are, for the most part, some places done?
I think when I look back to our own industry, cafes, restaurants, we sold our business in 2014. We were already beginning to notice a lot of new eating and drink coffee places opening up. I think it's my thoughts on this are there are too many now, that we will be saturated, and that the owners of those businesses will be struggling with trying to compete in the market. I think for cafes, restaurants, there are just so many, and the CBD now is flooded with those places, and there are very few. There are a lot fewer people now in the CBD than there were prior to the earthquakes.
So 10 years on from the quakes, how would you say you're doing mentally?
In regards to the earthquakes, I've recovered quite a lot. Like I said, I was in primary school then, only 11 or 10 years old. And so moving on from there, I don't really have much mental stuff from it. It was definitely people who are parents or in harder hit families who struggled a lot more. We were quite lucky.
And what would you say Christchurch has to do to fully recover itself?
The main thing that's been changed is that, like I said earlier, we need to get the rebuild finished, because until then there's always going to be Christchurch as the earthquake city. But the main thing is that I think we need to ensure that when an earthquake does inevitably happen again in the next few years or decades, we need to be ready for it. and that means ensuring that, unlike last time, our buildings are not vulnerable to earthquakes anymore, ensuring that all our cliffs and rock aren't going to be vulnerable to rock slides and rock falls anymore. Because even going through towards Sumner Beach, you will just see cliffs of rocks that have been waiting to be fell down essentially. And the main thing that we need to do to make us feel safe is ensure that when the next earthquake hits, it won't be as bad. We won't have people being homeless from it, we won't have many deaths this time.
All that's left now is to see what will come of Christchurch in 10 years. Will the damage done by the quakes still be seen? Will people still be battling issues to carry on with their lives and live without the stresses of repairs? Only time will tell.